Captures. So massive welcome to everyone who has turned up today to our second episode of our Leaning into Your Transition to Online Education. So I'm really happy to co-host with the lovely Jamie Engel, who is the founder of Neutopia. Do you want to just do a quick intro, Jamie?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I'm the founder of Neutopia, which is a social learning platform, and it really leans into learning in community or learning communities. So the social aspect and peer-to-peer learning. So it blends managing content, managing guided learning experiences and structured courses, and then the social peer-to-peer component.
Great. Yeah. And so Jamie and I came together a couple of weeks ago and wanted to kind of contribute somehow to the conversation that's happening right now, where everybody is potentially rushing online for the first time or having to refine their online skills, which seems to be the two categories. Yeah, Oppida is a digital education agency that focuses on raising the bar on online learning globally through learning design. So we're really about the experiences and the design side. And so that's what's going to come through a bit today in this webinar. And this one's called Embracing Webinars for Collaboration and Learning. So we're on a webinar together now, and we're going to try and embrace this for collaboration and learning as we're talking about that. And I guess one of the first things we just like to do is a little bit of housekeeping on the webinar, and is it just to ask you all to put yourselves on mute and while we're kind of facilitating the first part, and then as soon as we open for Q&A, obviously you take yourselves off mute. We are going to do a few things today. We're going to do a little bit of chat at the beginning. Jamie and I are going to sort of bounce off each other and ask each other some questions and talk through some of the things in this topic, so that we uphold the value proposition of this webinar, which is to learn some stuff. So we're going to try and share with you. We've got a guest speaker as well in today, Carla Raby, who's going to talk about her experiences facilitating online for about 2 years with RMIT Online, and how that's gone, and the techniques that she uses to embrace the webinar, because the webinar is a core part of the RMIT Online model. And then we're going to open up to Q&A. While as a hosting situation, what we do is we have two hosts generally, which is myself and Jamie. And when I'm talking, Jamie monitors the chat bar, and when he's talking, I monitor the chat bar. So if you do have a burning question that you really want to ask as we're in the middle of something, please throw it in the chat, and one of us will pick it up and then interrupt the other one to kind of answer it. Does that make sense? Cool. Love it. I'm getting lots of nods. Thank you for putting your camera on too. That's super important. We spoke about this last week around like actually, getting to see each other is really important. And I know I've got a screen share at the moment, but generally gallery view is a really good view to look at, but we're actually looking at the screen together. So we have quite a few people on today, so we normally would do intros. Jamie, do you feel like we should do intros today, or do you want to just kind of move in, because we had about 26 to 28 registrations? What are your sense?
Yeah, no, let's just continue on. We did it last week, but I might just say something about that as far as doing webinars. If it's under 20 or 30 people, like many classes that I have taught have been under 25 students, I do like to, or groups on webinars, I do like to have everyone introduce themselves and share a little bit, because I find it creates cohesion, and it's almost like having people over to your house for a dinner party. You kind of want people to mingle and get to know each other and know who's on the call, and all of a sudden it does change the atmosphere of the call. But if it's over 25 or 30, it starts to be too much. So we'd end up spending too much time on that. So it's just something to consider in the smaller webinar groups, that you can create that kind of social cohesion. That's it.
Great, thanks. I think we might leave it for today, because I think as we move into the Q&A, everyone will start to understand where everybody's from as well. We already did the introduction. So this is our special guest, and I'll throw to Carla in a minute, but I already gave a little bit of background on her. But Jamie, my first question for you to start us off for today is, as an experienced facilitator, because you've done both on face-to-face and online, and you've been in the game for a while, what do you believe are your top 3 tips for creating really great collaboration? So focusing on that collaboration side.
Yeah. So for collaboration, the first thing is just getting comfortable with the tools. So I think in the kinds of sessions I've run or co-hosted with people in the first session, if there's going to be multiple classes or just one session, just taking the time, it might be 5 minutes or so, to take people through the tools, because usually people, if they haven't used, let's say, Zoom like we're using now, they won't necessarily speak up to say that they're uncomfortable. They'll kind of be a bit shy about that. So really taking the time to make sure people are comfortable and situated and going through the various components. One thing that it's good to let them know is how to raise their hand. So if you go into, down at the bottom, there's a whole bunch of tools. So one of them is raising your hand.
You might have to be a bit more descriptive, Jamie. So where is it?
So under participants, if you click on that and open it up, you'll see at the very bottom on the right, a raise hand button. So if everyone wants to click on that.
Great. I see lots of hands going up.
Yeah.
Nice.
Excellent. Yep. Cool.
Cool.
And then I can control lowering the hand as you can, just clicking it again. So that's a good one for when you're asking questions. You can have everyone have the opportunity to put up their hand if they want to say something. There's also reactions on the bottom right, and there's a hand clap and a thumbs up. So that's another good way to have people feel like they can be interactive while someone's presenting, or to ask a question or get a reaction or response. There's share screen in the middle, and Bianca's got it on now, so I can change it.
I'll stop sharing and then you can go for it.
Okay. So there you go. And then there's a stop sharing, and it'll be in the top. If you share your screen, it just is on the top. It's a little red button. Okay, back to you, Bianca, on sharing the screen. And then on the bottom left is the mute button and the stop video, start video. So it's really good to take people through all of those tools so that they're comfortable. That's first one. Second one is having everyone's camera on. I just know as a facilitator, I find it a lot easier to see the faces of who I'm teaching, and it lets me connect with them. I have difficulty just doing it to the name and a dark tile, especially if it's like and just tiles. I find it very difficult to really keep it in a gallery view so that I can see everyone at once, and then I can see reaction and get a sense of the room. And then the third one is something I already mentioned, taking the time to introduce each other at the start, because that encourages a sense of psychological safety. People know a little bit about the other people that are in the room. And just like if it were a face-to-face environment, knowing who else is there. Just looking at the chat now.
That's a good view.
Yep. So when you do have screen share on, it does restrict everybody's view. So just as a facilitator knowing that as well, like you can't see everybody as well. So coming in and out of screen share is a good idea so that people aren't always just looking at a blank screen, they're looking at each other. And Tom also raised a good point that we can actually introduce ourselves on the chat function. You can, when you record Zoom, everything records and the chat records as well. So you can have those introductions recorded, et cetera, et cetera. So Tom has done that. So if you'd like to introduce yourself in the chat function, please go ahead and do that. He has just introduced himself.
Hey Bianca, let me just also ask, does anyone have any questions about anything that I just said, about any of the features, the technology, or any of the ideas I shared? Okay, great.
Cool.
Oh, Belinda, I can't find the reactions. So down at the bottom, it's on the right side. So there's 6 different icons and then one on the far.
It's funny because I can't find it either. So it might be something to do with the setting.
Fine.
So.
Oh, okay. It could be a paid feature, or it could be version maybe. I just upgraded my Mac and it seemed like a new thing. So it might have been a version. Let me add one more thing I forgot to say. So the other one that people we were playing with earlier, Andrew, thank you. Feature you have to enable. Might be in settings then. Choose virtual background. I know my old Mac couldn't do it. It didn't have enough power. And then I got a new Mac and then it showed up as it was capable to do that. So if you go into a little up arrow that's next to the stop video and you click on the up arrow, it gives you a few options related to the camera selection. And the second one is, Kyla just put on
in San Francisco.
Grass. Coming up in front of your face though, you're like in it. And you can choose a virtual background. And they have a few, like you can get off the planet with this background. If you're sick of being in isolation.
Bianca, do you mind if I just jump in very quickly?
Yeah, for sure.
Please.
Cool. Then thanks to Andrew who put that in the chat box. One of the most amazing things about Zoom, but it's kind of undiscovered at the moment, is that there's a whole range of other features that you can turn on, but you have to turn them on in your Zoom account before you host a meeting. So for example, file sharing for emotional reactions, all those kinds of things, allowing co-hosts to be able to co-host with you. It won't come up as an option when you're in a meeting unless you've actually gone into your account beforehand and enabled all those functions. So if you do have a paid Zoom account, you can go on and turn them all and Breakout Rooms, exactly. And a really great one.
Yeah. And we're going to play with the Breakout Rooms today, actually. Thanks, Carla, for adding that. I was playing around with the settings too. Just this afternoon, but I didn't see the one about, I want emojis, yeah, for sure. I want reactions on mine. I need to turn them on. And Belinda's running off the same accounts, that's why she can't get them either. So the next, we're going to get into some practical stuff as well, but we just at a high level, Jamie and I sort of looked at this topic and he sort of spoke to the collaboration side, and I'm just going to speak a little bit to the learning side. So how do we keep these webinars great for learning and not just for, having people go to space and have a good giggle. To make these things a really good good learning opportunities, we actually have to still employ the same principles as we would as a face-to-face environment, where we have a variety of different activities and we move that learner from active to passive and we engage them. So it's not just a one-way monologue. It's not going to be like a lecture. We have the tools, and it just takes some practice to manage them, to make sure that experience and to design that experience a little bit better. So there are lots and lots and lots of different platforms. I know Carla's a big fan of one called Kahoot, which is a really great fun quiz type platform that you can have prepared questions and then you have people playing on the screen and having a go. There's polling, small groups, which we're going to play with in a minute. We're going to go to a breakout group together. But basically, we really want to give opportunity for people to pause, to connect, to reflect. So you may, the same way you would in a classroom, think, pair, share, think about this, answer this question, share with a partner that we put you in a breakout room, et cetera, giving those opportunities to break it up and not having a long drawn out monologue of information. And you can also do death by PowerPoint in a webinar too. It's possible to have people completely zone out because you've just talked like to a PowerPoint slide. And the thing with Zoom is if they take their video off, they're probably out playing with the kids or whatever. They're not even on the screen. So you really want to keep them engaged. So on that note, I'm going to we're going to go into a breakout room now to answer this question. So, hang on a second, I'm just going to share my screen to show you the question. So in the small groups that we're about to put you in through the breakout, can you share details about the best activity that you've seen facilitated in a webinar? So share something great that you've seen done in a webinar. If you haven't seen anything done great in a webinar, then maybe just listen to the other people who've maybe who have ideas, or think about what you'd like to see done in a webinar. But just we're going to have 5 minutes in the breakout group to do that. And the great thing about breakout groups is that you can set the time limit, and then the people will get pulled back into the main area. So instead of in the face-to-face environment where you'd have to go out and pull people from outside and, you know, wait for them to gather their things, they don't have to do that because they get actually thrown straight back into the main room. So you get a 5-minute timer. So we're going to do that now. I'm going to send you into, we have 14 people, so I might send you into 3 rooms, or maybe 4 rooms. 4 rooms, and I'm going to do automatic send, which just distributes you in different ways. So I don't know where you're going to end up and who you're going to end up with. And then you can come back in. So the question is, share details about the best activity that you have seen facilitated. Okay. Any questions before I throw you into these groups? Yep. Great. Okay. 3, 2, 1, off you go. Should happen now. It's happening. Angelo's, there we go. Uh-huh.
I got rocketed. I got rocketed out of the other screen.
Did you? Yeah, yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
That was funny.
It's quite jolty, isn't it? It's like
It did. It just dragged me into the other screen.
Yep. We've got 2 groups.
How many breakout sessions did you have?
There was 4 rooms it split into. So, yeah.
Oh,
and now
cool.
we have 2 rooms are still, I didn't quite work out how to use the timer. I should have asked you first, Kyla, how to use the timer button, because I thought it was going to have a timer ticking down on you, but it didn't.
It does. It gave everyone a 1-minute warning.
Oh, after I sent the message saying there was a 1-minute warning. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Sorry, you guys.
All right. All of our rooms are back.
Bianca, do you want to explain how you do the breakouts for people?
Absolutely. So there is a function on the paid version of Zoom. So you have to turn it on before the call, and then you go to the more, is it more? No, participants.
Bianca, can we see you do this if you share your screen with us?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, we might be able to do that. That's a great idea. Let's have a look. Let's share screen completely. You're going to see my messy desktop, but that's all right. Right.
I don't know if it'll show the Zoom, that bar.
It might not show the bar.
It kind of excludes that, although it would be great to be able to show it. But it should be down at the bottom, bottom right. Is that
it's
where
in
it
the
is?
more, it's the more section. So can you see my screen now? I'm holding the cursor over it. It's not showing you though,
No,
is
it won't show you. It won't show you toolbar.
Okay. I could take a screenshot. Here we go, and see if I can put that in the chat.
Once you've enabled it, though, it is really quite an easy function to use. It'll come up as breakout room and you can select it. And then when you open that, you can choose how many rooms you'd like. So if you have a particular number that you'd like to, you can nominate who you would like in each room if you would like to actually determine that yourself. So I was just sharing in our breakout room that on Saturday night, actually, Bianca and I hosted an online quiz night with our family and friends, and we used breakout rooms as trivia teams. So we allocated the teams at the beginning into the breakout rooms, and then every time I went back and clicked that breakout room button, it actually saved those teams, so you don't have to do it over and over again if you would like to use the same teams a couple of times during a session. So we found that really effective, but like you just did then, Bianca, I think you just randomized it, so you can also have that option of just picking random rooms.
And Kyla, can you also go along and do a set time frame? So if you're running a class and you say to the students you got half an hour, will it automatically just bring them back in after that 30-minute time frame?
Yeah, absolutely. So once you've set that a number of rooms you like and the participants in each of the rooms, you have an option down the bottom which will say how long would you like to put them in those rooms for. So you can choose however long you like, and then there's also another option saying would they like a warning, like a 5-minute warning, 10-minute warning. So you can select that, and you can also choose to have a timer on in the room. So whilst they're in their breakout rooms, there'll be a countdown clock saying how long they have left. And when we were in our breakout rooms, then Bianca sent us a message. That was her doing that manually, but you can also automate, I think, some of those messages. And then as a facilitator, when that time is up, you can decide to give them an extension if you like. It'll ask you, would you like to bring people back now or give them an extension? And there's also a really amazing function in the breakout rooms, which we were calling creeping. As the facilitator, you can actually jump into each of the breakout rooms and kind of creep on the groups just to see how people are doing. So you can just kind of zoom around and be like, hey, how are you? And also when you're in the breakout room, there's a help function. So if someone's not really understanding the question that's been asked or they need some clarity, they can ask for help and get the facilitator to come into their room.
Yep, and you can do the creeping with the co-host. So Kyla and I were co-hosts the other night, and she could throw me in as well. And Tom's going to jump off. Tom, do you want to add any words of wisdom before you go? Because you're another Zoom king, I would call you.
I wish I had wisdom. Zoom king.
Yeah. Kyla's the Zoom queen, and you're the Zoom king.
I would just like to say before I go, I think because we're all trying our best to adapt with this new online teaching world, the changes have been quite seismic for everyone. So students are very forgiving, and I actually think they're more resilient than we give them credit for. But I would also like to say to everyone to take this sort of moment. We have the most captive audience as teachers we've ever had. These students are, well, most of them are in social isolation. So they're sort of hanging on every word and every instruction we're giving them right now. So we've got the perfect cohort ever to teach. So just keep that in mind, both for your own mental health and for theirs, but also just the way in which we approach learning design. I think it could be in some ways revolutionized from this moment. So good luck.
Nice one. Thank you. Good to meet you again. Awesome.
Carla, can you share a little bit about what you shared in the breakout about using the annotate and the stuff that you were doing with the quizzes? Because that was quite cool.
It was really fun.
Yeah, sure. So I was just explaining that this online trivia night that we did on the weekend, it even helped expand my knowledge of Zoom, and I've been using Zoom for many years to facilitate, mainly in an education setting, but also in a work meeting setting. But obviously, being a quiz night, it was a lot more fun and free, and I discovered a few tools that I wouldn't have normally used before, including the annotate function. So I can tell you how to do that. Actually, I don't think you have the option turned on your account settings yet, Bianca, but that's okay. Again, it's another function that you have to go into your account to turn on before you start the meeting. But essentially, it allows people to draw on the screen and to type things. So we had an online trivia night with a round, which was the drawing round. And I sent a private message to each of the drawers in the trivia teams, and they had telling them what to draw. And then their teams had to guess what they were drawing on the screen, and it was all happening at the same time. So we had a white screen with team 1, 2, 3, and 4, and people drawing it's like a Pictionary live. So it was a lot of fun. It was chaotic, and we encouraged everyone to come off mute for the whole night, so that it really was like, people talking over the top of each other and making jokes and comments, and really created a real life environment. But yeah, that function was one that I used for the first time, and also the breakout room function was really helpful.
Fantastic.
Cool.
Thank you.
I think chaotic is the best word to describe it. So Carla, did you want to talk a little bit more about, I guess, what you've learned around over the years trying to create this for learning, for your work with Dessert and RMIT Online, and how because this was your only synchronous touch point with those students every week. So how do you kind of get the maximum out of it? And if you are happy to talk too about how you decided what to put into the webinar and what you kept out in text form. So what did you send them to prepare them? How did you do that blended experience? Because that's what people are grappling with at the moment, not to try and create exactly the same as they would in class. They have to think about how they split their content over that synchronous and asynchronous way.
Yeah, for sure. So I think one of the lessons I've had is that you need to create the right environment for people to feel comfortable and safe to share. I think, like you were mentioning, Jamie, around that, that safe, that psychological safety for students. And you might think that that's easier in an online environment because people are not looking at each other, but I think that that's actually quite scary and challenging for some people who haven't come onto the online environment before. So I imagine a lot of students are feeling a bit of anxiety around that. A couple of, I guess, tips that I have on that is it might feel natural to just ask a question and expect that will create discussion like it would in a room when you're standing up in front of a group of people. But I found that it's very different on the online environment because you can't just look at somebody and expect that they're going to respond like you would in the real world. So I find other ways to create conversation is much more effective rather than just saying, here's a group question, what's your opinion? And other ways to do that, I think, is by using different functionalities of technology and different tools. So Bianca mentioned that I use something quite a lot in my teaching called Kahoot Quiz, and there's lots of online quiz functions, but what I normally do will design a quiz around the learning outcomes for that week for my students, and then I just remind everybody to come to the webinar live. So in my communication with my students, promoting the webinar, I'll say, if you come along live this week, you're going to get more value out of it because we're having an online quiz. So kind of playing into people's competitiveness, or encouraging them to come and participate rather than watch the recording, because they'll get more value from it. And then telling them what they need in advance. And usually with some of those tools, all you need is a phone sitting next to you. And I can probably guarantee that most students always have a phone next to a computer. And so you're using two different types of technology. You're using, you know, something to actually engage them and give them an opportunity to answer questions. But what the questions do is also create conversations. So, you know, we'll have a question on the screen, everybody answers, then I'll display the correct answer, and then we'll have a conversation around that. So I'll say, who answered, you know, X, Y, and Z for this? Do you want to share why? Who answered, you know, the other answer, and why did you think it was that? And it's a lot more organic way, I think, to create conversation, and allows people to feel a bit more safe in sharing, and also shows them that they might not be the only one that's gotten an answer wrong or thought a particular way about something. So I think that's a good tool or a way of actually creating that safe space. And I think another one is definitely the breakout functions, because if you've got a large group of students, it's easy to kind of sit on mute and, you know, sit back and not engage. But if you put people into smaller groups and you kind of give them that space to interact. And I also think that sometimes when we record a lot of our sessions, which all of my classroom teaching is recorded because students need to be able to watch the recording, that can be something that creates fear for students. They don't want to be recorded. They don't want to be recorded saying the wrong thing and look funny in front of their friends. So again, using the breakout function, it means that the class group discussion is recorded, but the breakout sessions are not. So it gives them another opportunity to be in a safe space.
Great point about that recording thing. That actually does put some people off. And because all the universities promise that they can have access to the content 24/7, then they need to record webinars, which is, you know, just part of the value proposition, but can actually be a barrier.
Yeah, I'll just add on that. I always make a point to get everyone's permission, to just give people the opportunity. So I'll say, I'm going to record this. It's only for our class's use, just for everyone that's here. It's not going to be posted publicly, just to make sure everyone knows the intention of the recording, and making sure everyone is agreeing to being recorded. I don't think I've ever had someone say no, but I think allowing people that choice is really important, and then they know how it's going to be used.
Yeah.
What if they say no? That's a good question. Well, since it hasn't happened,
I mean, in Carla's situation, you can't ask them because I don't think the university has a policy, so you wouldn't be able to, and they say not. But yeah, I think Jamie, in your situations, what if someone had said, like, would the university have actually allowed you not to record?
Probably.
We haven't had a policy, so I guess one option, if someone said no, is to just have them not put their face on the screen, and they don't have to respond. I guess they can just be a passive participant and not engage. That would be one option, in opting out, like what Stephen's writing there. What if you forget to ask? I haven't forgotten to ask before starting, but I have forgotten to record. So I usually just apologize and say, oh, I forgot to record, and then ask after I started. So, yeah.
That if you're facilitating regularly, I always put into my slide decks the same slide at the beginning of every facilitation that I do, and that's like a reminder of, you know, welcome to country, recording, your basic kind of housekeeping. You don't need to tell people where the toilets are because they know, but it's a similar principle to that thing that you would do when you're facilitating a meeting or a lesson at the beginning of anything.
Can I also add that what we do with all our students, because they're generally from sort of year 10, 11 and 12 on, we have an authority to publish form as part of the enrolment form right at the very beginning, and you know who it is that's actually requesting that they don't be photographed or recorded, and then we actually have it on our roll, so that way anytime a particular student that doesn't want to be that, like you said, Jamie, they can black out if they're doing Zoom, or if not, we're fully aware that they're not to have anything published. So I just call it an authority to publish form. It's just a standard document we attach to the enrolment. at the beginning.
Yeah, great idea. And Bianca, sorry, I don't think I answered your question around what materials do I take from classes into the webinars or not. So I can touch on that if you like.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so I hold usually weekly webinars with my students, and so what I do is look at the obviously the content that they're learning that week, and rather than taking any of that actual content, I just pick a theme, usually one or two themes, that is the major kind of theme of the content that's been covered for that particular week, and if it connects to the assessments, then even better, and then come up with an activity or a particular tool to discuss that theme. So I don't use any of the actual content from the learning, because I think it's there for them to make their way through at their own time. I just pick up on those themes. So a lot of what I teach is around employment law and those kinds of things. So we'll pick a theme, for example, bias, and we'll design an activity around that theme in the webinar. And then if you can draw the learning outcomes to the assessment pieces, it's even better, because obviously students really care about the assessments and what they're going to be marked on. And I find rather than just discussing the assessments, that can be quite bland, but actually having a chance to practice them. So I've had a webinar I had a couple of weeks ago. The assessment students were writing interview questions, and I actually came up with a job description and asked them to interview me in the webinar. So put them on the spot, asked them to design questions in groups, and they came back and asked me the questions, and I responded, and sometimes I responded purposely bad, and then kind of got them to reflect on, well, why did I respond that way? Oh, it's because you framed the question in this particular sense. So I always try to come up with an activity or something that will allow them to practice the theme or the content or the skill that's been taught that week, and also try to relate it to the assessment.
Awesome. Thank you, Carla. Yeah, it's a good example of how we have to think about what is the best use of that synchronous time you have. What is the best use of that? How can we create that engagement inside this particular part? So we have 20 minutes to go. Jamie, you happy if we throw to Q&A now? Just open it right up. There's my co-host.
Yeah. If anyone's got any questions about anything that we've said or any other topics, feel free to raise your hand. You can give that a try if you haven't used it, or just put it in the chat and we'll aim to answer as best
or just unmute yourself and see if we can get some chaos.
Yeah.
everyone can unmute if you'd like, and we'll just see if we can have a conversation. We haven't got too many people on here, so it shouldn't be too bad.
Any burning questions?
Mari's sticking her physical hand up. Two people raise their hand.
You're on mute, Mari. Mari, you've got to take yourself off mute. We can't hear you.
I'll just, oops, there we go.
All right. I'm
there
thinking
you are.
about the actual dynamics of the group. In any group, you're going to have the people that want to be drawn out. It's a bit like the consent, whether they want to be filmed, videoed, or whatever. But how do you go about actually bringing individuals into the discussion, or do you just say, well, that's the way they are, and if they just want to be voyeurs, inverted commas, that's okay?
Maybe I'll answer, and then I'd be curious what Bianca and Kyla say, because maybe there's a variety of opinions, which is great. I know the groups I have, I do put a lot of emphasis at the start of the course. So the first day, building, like let's say this were the class and we're going to have a 12-week course. I would put a bit of time in this first day of everyone getting to know each other. So it might be going around the room and everyone saying their name, their interests, something about their background. So a bit of a mixer. And I would do the same thing in a face-to-face class, spending that first hour doing something that lets people mix and get to know each other. All of a sudden, then I think there's a bit of connection and safety, and people know who the other people in the room are, and they're not just mysterious images. From that, if I find that you know, like I just asked the question to you guys and said, you know, anyone have any questions? And it's just dead silence. And that's pretty normal. And it's also normal in face-to-face classes that people can be shy, especially the first week or the first 2 weeks. I think it's just, you know, you find a few people that are a bit more outspoken, but I know on Zoom, what I'll start to do is ask fairly simple things for discussion. I try not to put someone on the spot. Like I don't want people nervous that they're going to get called or anything. So just keeping it pretty loose and easy questions, but I start to make an effort to start choosing people. Like I'll say, okay, no one's talking, so I'll just pick someone. I'll just go, you know, Marie, why don't you give me your thoughts on how we could get discussion going? And once we start going around, people get used to that. And I find that works pretty well. I haven't really encountered, you know, I've taught, I don't know, 800 or 900 students. I haven't encountered anyone saying, I really hate that, or I don't want to get called on or anything like that. This is all tertiary, so undergrads and master's students, so adults. Could be very different for, you know, K to 12. So I'll admit I'm not familiar with younger groups, so it might be a bit different. But I know with adults or young adults, just that's gone pretty well. And then it's just, you have to realize that because you're looking at the Zoom screen, you got to name people and say, Marie, I'd like you to talk, and then I'm going to go to Bianca next. And that's another thing. I might let people know that I'm going to be coming to them in a little bit. So they don't, again, I'm always trying to not make people feel like they're on the hot seat or, you know, too uncomfortable. I try to keep comfort levels really high.
Yeah, that's really good. I think
I
I concur. I think you can, if you're in a group where you've got a co-facilitator like Jamie and I, what we could possibly do is if, you know, there was say 30 people on this call, as Jamie's going through facilitating his bit, I could be prompting people quietly, hey, it'd be really great to hear your opinion, et cetera, especially if we know the group. So there could be that co-facilitation of kind of supporting, like you would in a room when you have a co-facilitator, you creep over to the table and you look at their group and you say, hey, you know, you guys are saying some really cool stuff. I'd really like you to share. So there could be some of that prompting going on. But in a small group, you would probably know everybody that's on your call. So, you know, you might be able to just do it sort of the way Jamie was describing. And I'll just point out too, it's really good, Kerry, that you haven't got your video on, because I just want to point out, if people don't want to have their video on, and I'm wondering, it might be because she's, you know, got playing with the cutest cat in the universe and doesn't want us all to feel like really, really sad that we can't pat the cat. But it's great because Kerry has a picture of herself. So even though she doesn't have a video on right now, she still has an image of herself. So that's still a better thing to get the students to do. So if they do drop out, the camera's not working or something's going on, you can at least see who you're speaking to. So Kerry, why is it you don't have your video on today? Good morning.
I haven't even got my headset on properly.
Thanks for your suggestion in the chat, by the way.
Yeah, that's all right. I was doing something else and then I remembered about the session, so I've jumped on while I'm doing something else at the same time. So I thought I'm going to jump in, but nice. That's why I haven't got my curtains closed. You'll just get an eye full of bright light, and I haven't.
It's all right. Your photo's fabulous. Your photo's fabulous.
Thank you.
And it was a good talking point anyway. Carla, did you want to add anything to the kind of engaging bit?
Yeah, I think I agree with everything you both just said. I think the point on mixes is really valid, Jamie, and I think doing that early on, if you're facilitating a group over many weeks or months even, is really important, because it does create that safe space. And I think one other strategy I use is it's good to have people on mute in order to minimize background noise, but I can find that that is also a barrier to people actually feeling comfortable to come off mute. So when you do a Q&A session or a particular part in your webinar, I always say, okay, everybody off mute now. So it doesn't matter if there's kind of kids crying in the background or things going on. People just then don't have to press one button in order to talk, and you can get a bit more of a natural reaction. So if someone's saying something, you can hear someone else go, oh yeah, where you don't get that when it's just deathly silent and everyone's on mute. So I think that helps a bit too.
Well, we could just have everybody off mute right now if you'd like. Let's try it. Shall we try it and go through the last 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's see how much noise we can create.
Maybe, I'm just going to go to Lucy Thorpe's question. Does the nature of collaboration change when you have a class or webinar with large number of people? Absolutely. And what Bianca said, that you need more skills as a facilitator, absolutely true. I'd say where it really changes on Zoom, and it depends on the size of your screen, is when it starts to be multiple pages. Because if, like right now, what are we, 4, 8, 12, 15?
15.
So about 16, at least on a laptop, is the limit, and then it'll start doing multiple pages. Once I can't see everyone in the room at once, like I would in a face-to-face room, that I can see everyone, I start feeling disconnected, because then I don't know, you know, if people are getting bored, or they're tuning out, or they've left the room, or they've gone on. You just start losing connection. So what I've noticed between a group that's, say, under 20, like this, versus a group that's 120, that you really need a second and maybe even a third facilitator, so that one person is dedicated on manning the breakouts and managing all of that. Another person might just be focused on the chat and fielding questions, because you can't kind of really facilitate and hold the space for the room and follow chat at the same time. So I just think, be prepared that if you're going to get above 20, or say 25 would be the upper limit for myself, you're going to need a co-facilitator. And if it gets up into the 100, I'd say you might need 3 or 4 people total to manage the space. And I think that's similar to face-to-face. If you had, let's say, a lecture hall, or we're doing a guest speaking, running an event, you're going to have more people at a face-to-face event. You know, you got people manning the tickets, you got people managing the theater, you got the facilitator. So it does become a team effort, having it run well. I wouldn't feel comfortable running 100 people just myself at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would completely agree with that as well. And I used to work for a remote company, a startup, an American startup. We were all fully remote, but we would, it was a remote work and lifestyle platform. So sometimes we'd be in the same cities as each other. And we'd have, when I first started, I think I was employee number 20, and it grew to about 120 by the end. So we're having all staff meetings with 120 staff all around the world working remotely. And it did get a little bit chaotic, but we put in things like you just said, Jamie, we put in different rules around meetings. And one of the other rules that was really important to us was one screen, one person, because sometimes we would have 2 or 3 people in a meeting room together, and they would join the screen at once. But then we realized that they were less engaged because they were chatting between each other and not participating, or not really watching what was going on in the large group. So when we developed that rule, it added more, screens for the facilitator to see, but it created stronger engagement between the people. And we had, team leaders of different divisions actually on the chat box monitoring things as well, to be able to support the facilitator who was leading the meeting.
Cool. Belinda's got her hand up. She had her hand up before, and Brad has Andrew's put a really good question in the Zoom, but in the chat as well. So Belinda, you go first. I think we might go to Andrew's.
A question for maybe Kyla, or anyone in the group. If you have gone from more face-to-face to more online, how are you finding that impacting your workload and time management? Do you spend more time preparing online activities than you did preparing face-to-face activities?
Good question. I can't actually answer that because I've never taught face-to-face, to be honest. I'm sorry, my teaching career has been entirely online.
I can maybe give you some kind of reply. So I noticed when I started using Zoom probably about 5 years ago, and I was frustrated using the Collaborate platform because it just wasn't as good, and I couldn't see people I was teaching. And I found one thing I really needed was to be able to see everyone. So I started using Zoom to do my first online course, and something felt weird to me. And I realized after a few classes, I felt sort of blind with my heart. So it's like I couldn't really feel the room. I couldn't feel if people were getting bored, or I couldn't really sense what was going on. So I found the difference I had to make was being more in conversation with the students. So saying, okay, who's wanting to take a break now? And going, is anyone getting bored? And just asking the questions. And they weren't questions I found I needed to do in face-to-face. I just sort of knew. So I think my intuition didn't work as good at the start. And so there was this adjustment period, and it took a few months. And then I realized I could do certain things to kind of hack around not being able to quote unquote feel the room. But I did find after a while, my empathy adjusted and I started to sense things. There was this adjustment period. The other thing I found is I needed to, I don't know how to correctly describe this, but it's almost like project myself more into the screen, into the camera. So kind of like pushing myself out into the virtual world with the students, because I just really value connection. And I found there was something distinctly missing. But then again, after a few months, and these are all nuanced kinds of things I realized, but I did find my way into it. And then I really liked being on Zoom. I thought, oh, okay, I can still create an intimate space that students feel safe, that we all feel really connected. And I got exactly identical results, whether it was face-to-face or online, that there was no difference in the outcomes for the students and how close we felt at the end of the 12-week journey together. What else would I say on that? I guess as far as setting up, because everyone does learning design so differently, coming up with activities for people to connect, I guess it would take a little bit of time in that adjustment period where I was trying to think, what can I do? Like, okay, if we're going to do a post-it workshop, like design thinking style, oh gosh, how am I going to do that online? It's going to be different. So I think there is a bit of thinking overhead time, but once you do it, the time saving is you don't have to travel to school. So I go, okay, I've just saved commute time. So 45 minutes each way, let's say. So that could go more
Sydney.
Prep time. Yeah. So I think it does balance out, but I'd say if you haven't done a lot of teaching on Zoom, it is maybe that if you're used to face-to-face, don't be surprised if there's a kind of adjustment period where you're trying to get the same feeling. And I guess a lot of I center on feeling and connection. So that's what I found a little bit challenging to navigate at the start, but then I got there. So I guess I tell people it's really possible. Like you can do it. It just means getting used to the technology.
Yes, and Steve just said if you say something funny and they sit, you may have not engaged them if they don't laugh at your jokes. Yeah, jokes and humor. All the other tricks we have are very, very applicable online. Use as many jokes and humor as you can.
Yeah, and totally agree, Stephen. Yeah, it's seeing the connection in people's faces and reactions. I guess at the start, I couldn't tell if people were bored, confused, tired. Like it all looked like the same look to me. So that's what I had trouble with at the start.
Can I just say that when we train, we go to a place and train for a week because of the nature of our training, and we have the same problem for the first couple of hours. Have we got these people on board? Do they hate me? Are they interested? Do they think this is funny? And it takes a while to get people on board. And I suppose it's the same with this.
Totally. And I do want to add one other thing. I started to realize how much I smiled or didn't smile because the Zoom shows you a mirror of yourself. Whereas in a face-to-face environment, you don't have anything showing you what your face looks like to other people. And it started to coach me, that feedback loop, to smile more. And I just found myself being really conscious of not a fake smile, but genuinely like actually being, I think maybe that's part of what I meant, like pushing myself out into the virtual space with them. Is be conscious, like smile, like, be present, be happy, be really conscious of how I'm looking. Because if I'm looking bored by what I'm teaching, that's going to come across. So I think being present, that in some ways you're facilitating, you are on stage, not in a distance way, but in a really connected way. And that, creating a space and being emotive matters.
I completely agree. I think there's also some really fun things that you can do to take advantage of the fact that people are in their homes, which you just cannot do in the workplace or in a school environment. And one of my first week, I had a webinar before with it when I teach for RMIT before the actual course starts. We have O Week, and I always do a warm-up webinar O Week just to get people familiar with each other and feeling more comfortable when asking any questions that they might have. And for one particular one, I asked students to bring their pets to the webinar. So we had everyone who had a pet at home bring their pet, and I was looking after Bianca's cat at this time, so we all brought our pet and introduced our pets to each other as well. And then actually one of these students had this most gorgeous dog. It was this big white fluffy thing, and it came to the webinar every week after that, and it became like part of the class. By the end, we were all talking on the message boards around about this dog and checking in how this dog was going. So I think there's ways, and you know, if people have got kids at home as well, it's a way of actually kind of, you know, getting to know people as well because they're in their home environment.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
I would say that. I love having people's pets spontaneously come up under the screen sometimes and poke their head in and then go away. So I think all those things that let people be more authentic and more themselves is actually the benefit of the intimacy. That's the nice side of it.
Anyone with a cat knows that the cat decides to come on your computer when you're on it anyway, so you can't really avoid it. I'm wondering, Kerry, just before we go, you might be able to pull your cat up onto the screen because she's the most adorable thing in the world. But anyway, I'm just conscious of time. I don't like to keep people more time than they've promised. Kerry's going to find the cat. There she is.
Hang on. She's underneath the desk. Hang on. Hang on.
I have just been asked by Angelos, and I actually didn't ask you guys for permission at the start, but we are recording this. But if anybody is not okay with that, let us know. Oh, there she is. Look at that. Oh, Kerry,
I've woken her up.
I will say I work with wildlife, and you've got to be careful what pets you show, because if I've got a pet snake, it might send your student through the roof. So you have to be really use discretion when you use that pet. But Jamie, can I also make a point? I teach what's called TAE, training and assessment, to whole heap of government agencies across New South Wales and Australia. And I've found just in the last little while with the isolation, a very, very interesting points being made by students. They've actually said that they find in a face-to-face class, there's a lot of conversation and interaction going on, and they often miss the very key points of what's being said. But in a Zoom environment, when the person's got the floor and they're saying, they're taking in absolutely everything. And they've said that since they've actually taken on a 6.5-hour training session using Zoom, that their level of retention has been far greater than being in a face-to-face class. And I think there's a lot in that. And it's not just one group that's actually said the Zoom environment allows them to be a lot more involved in the class and take on board a lot more of their sort of fellow students. But all in all, it's just been a very, very good transition from face-to-face learning into that. I call it the Zoom room or the flexible learning room. And it's been very, very rewarding by getting that feedback.
Amazing, Brad. Thank you.
That's good.
Brad, are you getting a lot of people asking to do that facilitating e-learning unit now? The elective?
Sorry, Kerry?
Are you getting a lot of people asking for their elective unit to be that facilitate e-learning unit now rather than the make a presentation?
Very much. So I've got students that have got one major delivery to go, and they've actually videoed the whole lot and used other avenues for that delivery unit, and they've uploaded it into Dropbox, and they've been able to meet the requirements by using that. So it's a very good option around having to do the face-to-face delivery.
Awesome. I've been saying to people for the last few weeks, digital learning was like the poor cousin, and now we're like the favorite auntie. So everybody's finally like, oh, this is exciting. We could do this, and this could be really good. And like, you know, we've kind of just been ignored a bit for a while, but you know, we're coming back to show you that we can do cool stuff too. So on that note, I just want to ask a very quick permissions. Has anybody got a problem with me sharing anyone got a problem with me sharing this recording up onto YouTube or Wistia? Because there's a few people who have asked to be able to share it on with friends and family and people. Anyone got a, You can send me a private message now if you want to say no. So just go into the chat. And sorry, Carl, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, even last night I went to an 80s dance class via Zoom, believe it or not, with my football club, and it was amazing. It was the most effective thing I've seen.
Yep. My Zumba instructor is now on Zoom.
Yes, and I'm doing yoga.
Everyone's on the Zoom bandwagon.
Yeah. I wish I had shares in Zoom.
Can I offer a quick tip for us, for the lectures?
Please.
Yeah, stand up every now and then, every few minutes, and perhaps if you mute your camera, if you switch your camera off, you can do weights like I've been doing for.
Do a yoga stretch. Maybe build it into your activities.
Totally, and a bit of music.
Oh yeah.
That always goes well.
And some CBD. CBD is always good.
Awesome. I think we get our creative brains on as educators. We're very creative. That's our core. So you just have to be open to different ways of doing things right now. But I guess
Bianca,
Jamie.
Can I say one thing? Also, Bianca and I have been chatting about future topics. So if you want to email through, if you have any thoughts on topics you'd like us to talk about, could be around learning design. I know I said to Bianca, I'd love to do a talk on the hero's journey and storytelling related to learning design and intrinsic motivation. So there's a whole bunch of stuff we could talk about. And I'm sure, Bianca, you have heaps and heaps as well. So if anyone wants to email through some things they'd love for us to talk about, we'd be quite welcome. Steve.
Yeah, I have a quick question. You had these breakout sessions. Were they supposed to be integrated into the overall webinar and answer your question, or was that just? What was that all about?
It was supposed to. We were going to come back to actually you guys sharing that answer, but we ended up getting sidetracked on how to actually do the breakout. So I chose not to go to that because I wanted to keep us time. But yes, we would actually integrate. Yeah, we would integrate that question. That's a very good point. But we kind of came back in, and it was more like the experience that you had of that.
Gotcha.
Breakout.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that was a good question too. What the future of webinars, like any innovations or anything that are interesting that can be shared. And I'll sidebar Jamie after this about something that was a recent update that I'm familiar with.
Yeah, cool. Be interested to see how the technology advances at the moment, because now there's such a presence of it. I don't know if you've ever seen that the Silicon Valley TV show, the piss tape of Silicon Valley. I don't know. They have an episode where they zoom in a person like a hologram. So hopefully we'll all be hologramming to each other.
Yeah, I was talking about augmented reality instead of a blackboard that shows information in the pop-up screen in the foreground, versus having to share your screen or show a PowerPoint, which could get tedious.
Yeah,
something
there'll be
more
all sorts
dynamic.
of innovations now. Yeah. Yep, for sure. And next week we're talking about easing the transition to online environments with the right tools. So often the reason this came out was that everybody sort of gets bombarded with a lot of the EdTech tools out there, and often we have basically what we need in most of our LMSs. We end up getting excited by all the fancy things. And so it's about how do we choose the right tools for the right experience. So.
Gotcha.
Any final words, Jamie?
No, just a pleasure to meet everyone, all the people that are doing already, and great to see the people I already know.
Same here. Thanks for everyone for coming.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you all. Good luck.
Bye.
Much
Stay well, everybody. Stay healthy. Stay healthy.
Bye.
Cheers.
Steve, I'll message you soon.
Okay, thanks, Jay.